right, so Kezia, do we have people, oh, you're just doing that now?
No, we're ready.
Okay, so do we have Amanda on or nobody yet?
Nobody yet. Amanda
Okay.
said she'd be a little late.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, so,
Pete's not here, and Mike's not.
right. So this meeting is called to order at 3:03 PM. And we'll do the roll call. Ellen Elliott. Here. Mary Smith. Here. Peter Whirlin, we know he's not here, he might be flying. Michael Richter may also be here later. John McWilliams.
I know where he's at.
And Amanda Cooper, and Amanda may call in, and same with Michael. Right, and then also Peter, but he's flying, so he wasn't sure of his schedule. So you have before you the minutes from June 17, 2025. Do we have any corrections or comments on the minutes? So do we,
Michael's name is spelled wrong.
sorry, Michael's name is spelled wrong?
I don't know if he spells it differently. I'm just reading through them now.
Oh, there should be an H, I
H in
think, in
there.
his name.
Again, there should be a final T on my name.
When I was transcribing this, I spelled it because was listening to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you think Richter is Richter?
No, I think Michael has an H.
Michael has an H, I see H.
Michael is MICH.
I see, yep, you're right. I see.
So, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected for Michael Richter's name?
Wait, we had
Wait,
members of the audience attending our last meeting. Roden Bridge, you.
We typically do not list members of the audience unless we take a roll call of their names.
But they had questions,
Yes, those were included in the Q&A.
and we typically include audience members when we have our board meetings.
Yes, they're required during board meetings to state their name and their address.
Right, but so even in these minutes, it says a question was asked by the audience, why would we not indicate
Who it
who
was.
asked that question?
can we add that in?
You remember who asked it?
Oh, we don't, these are recorded, right, Keisha? Yeah.
It's not that hard. The question was asked by the audience about whether New Jersey would be doing its own investigations. That was Stephen Potts, the ADA
Oh,
for
yeah.
Clear Creek County or Fifth District, whatever.
I do know that the person that said that they were in favor was
Gary,
Gary.
another.
The other people did not say their names, so I did not include it, but I think one was John, but John.
John Gaskins was here, Stephen Potts was here, and who was the
Stephen.
other one? Gary Haynes.
Can you please spell Stephen Potts' name for me?
I think it's STEPHEN and then Potts, POTTS. He's the ADA.
Was he speaking as an official or as or just a citizen?
Well, you asked, he identified himself as what his role was.
Okay, so I can look that up, that's no problem.
Yeah.
It was I think deputy district attorney,
Mhm.
and then I think when John,
Assistant.
I think when John spoke, he was answering a question from somebody on the task force, right?
My question.
Yes, I think you asked the,
And then Gary Haynes was
Mhm.
in favor.
yep,
Mhm.
okay, I will make those changes.
Yeah, you were looking for John's last name, is it Laguerre? It's not the one, I just saw it in here. You're looking for spelling of.
No, John Gaskins,
Yes.
he was in the
Yeah.
audience, but he answered Ellen's question about investigations, I think. How it was done previously. It's,
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
All those may I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you. The minutes from June 17th are passed as corrected. So action items today, we're gonna have a great policing alternative presentation done by Kezia Hart. Kezia, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull up that presentation real quick. All right, we do have some participants in the chat that I think are Amanda and Peter. But the names are not,
Can you promote them so that they can?
yes,
Hi, it's Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Amanda,
And who's Papa Whiskey, is that for you?
I'm just guessing.
Can we get them to identify themselves?
Yeah, it's me, Peter, sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hello.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I should go along on that, Jack.
Yes.
All right, so I was asked to present on an alternative for policing in Georgetown that could have possibly taken a lot of different forms, and what I decided to present on is a model I'm calling minimal policing. So I wanted to start out by identifying why do we have police? I think that the four main reasons that we do have police and law enforcement is crime prevention, law enforcement, community building, and emergency response. So I'm gonna go through each one of those categories and talk about how police handle those things and what an alternative might be. So for crime prevention, police strategies, we have fear of punishment. We have officers who might be stationed in a location where people see them and just don't want to get a ticket. We have hotspot patrols where officers identify areas where there's higher rates of crime and might patrol those areas more aggressively. And we have public awareness education, so police officers letting the public know different strategies for reducing crime and making people aware of particular incidences that are happening at that period of time. Alternative strategies that people have used is environmental engineering. In particular, something called crime prevention through environmental design, which has shown reduction in crime and enhanced quality of life according to multiple studies. And facade improvements, there's one study where they just painted the exterior of certain buildings and that reduced crime by a significant amount. So things where people improve the look and feel of a location can prevent crime. We hear about these kinds of things with like broken window policing policy as well, where places that look shabbier tend to experience higher rates of crime. So the simple prevention for that would be to invest in those spaces and make them look nicer. Investment in education. For every dollar that's invested in education, there's a disproportionately higher crime prevention than prisons, for example, and policing. Some specific numbers are 40% reduction in violent crime in Flint, Michigan, that in certain street segments where they participated in a clean and green program. And we know also that social services, investment in housing stability, mental health services, and things like that also reduce crime. Law enforcement. So law enforcement, for the most part, there does have to be somebody with a post certification to do certain things like traffic enforcement, use of physical or deadly force, arresting and transporting suspects, executing warrants, things like that. And so the alternatives for those don't really exist. We do need policing at a baseline for certain things. But there are alternatives that we can invest in at the same time, code enforcement and things like restorative justice. So restorative justice is a concept where you take people who have committed crimes and you put them in contact with the people that were the victims of those crimes. And the intent of that communication is for people to humanize the other person and to pay back the community and that person in a real tangible way. So if you commit graffiti instead of the fine and jail time or whatever it is, you go and clean up that graffiti and you actually do the work of restoring the harm that you caused. So that's the idea of restorative justice. Community building, so police strategies for community building, and I think our sheriff's department has done a fairly good job of some of these things. Presence at events, we see our sheriff department showing up with the Christmas markets and at like Easter events. Patrol check-ins, our previous police department was really good about checking in with shop owners, things like that, youth engagement. But there's obviously a lot of different ways to build community, having community events where people get to know each other, having a stronger sense of everybody knowing each other and the location that they live in and feeling connected to the people of the place. Builds community, civic engagement projects like our cleanup day that we do, and having kids participate in building their town and programs that make the town better, create a sense of community, and then after school programs of mentoring, along with a lot of other things. Emergency response. So again, there are certain things that we need officers for with post certification, traffic incidences. When we pull people over in particular, that has to be a police officer. So if there's somebody who is drunk driving, that needs to be an officer. And for traffic events, that can be other people, those like fire EMS are often the first responders to traffic incidences. And then threat to life as well. So use of force, like I said earlier, is something that you do have to have a post certification for. So if there's somebody threatening lives with guns or something like that, you need officers for that. But there are alternative strategies for some things, like the mental health crises that people experience that we often call police for to engage with them. Our community has started to use CHATS, the Community Crisis and Health Assistance Team, to intervene in those situations as opposed to an officer, somebody who's trained in mental health resources. Then we also have fire and EMS for health emergencies and other things like that. So some emergency response does need to stay with the police, but there's a lot of emergency response that we can use alternative methods for. So this model, the minimal policing model, basically pitches that there's no patrol, but we still have emergency responders. The sheriff is actually obligated per the Colorado Revised Statutes to do the following: preserve the peace within the county, serve and execute all writs and legal processes issued by a lawful authority, apprehend and secure persons charged with crimes, attend district and county courts and act as their officer, manage and operate the county jail, transport prisoners to and from court or other facilities, suppress unlawful assemblies and riots, act as a fire warden, maintain records and reports as required by law, issue concealed handgun permits, and execute evictions or repossessions as ordered by the courts. So if we decided as the town of Georgetown to not engage with the sheriff's department or restart our policing department and use that money to invest in some other things, the sheriff's department is still obligated to respond to certain things. We could also hire a non-sworn code enforcement officer that would work under town administration to do municipal courts or municipal code enforcement, weeds and trash and nuisance and things like that, but don't require a sworn officer. And then, you know, the money that we save from not investing in that patrol could be invested in data-driven crime reduction strategies, like we talked about at the beginning. Obviously, there are some challenges with a minimal policing model. Community perception, that idea of public safety that people have in their head, is often affiliated with police officers. There are studies that show that the presence of police officers does increase people's sense of security and reduce their fear. Specifically community policing, but there's also studies that show that there are reductions in fear from, again, like increased lighting and environmental design that makes people feel safer. This could also put a potential strain on county law enforcement resources, you know, they'd be down potentially some officers since they would not be getting funding from us and they would have backup from the police department that we're providing. The reputation of minimal policing may generate criminal activity. There's no research on that, but I know that that's a fear that people have. So I don't have any research, but I do not cite it in there, so. But I know that that's something that people are concerned about. Legal restrictions for some police duties, so we would need some policing, but the sheriff is obligated to provide that minimal amount of policing, so. Benefits of minimal policing model would be minimal liability. We know more and more that insurance and liability for officers is increasing all the time. There's also increased liability for the officers themselves, which has reduced the number of people that actually want to be in the field. There's an opportunity to creatively address public safety issues. Painting a building, if that can reduce things, is a cool initiative. Having funding for more opportunities to build community and build a beautiful space for people to live is, I think, exciting. Funding for proactive interventions to help people with housing stability and with mental health safety programs. And then it would also make us a leader for an alternative model for public safety. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. So questions for Keisha? So I have a question. So I thought we were gonna be looking at a hybrid between the county model and then or having our own police force, and this is actually a third option. So are we going to see any side-by-side comparisons? Like, where's this, do you have citations on like what towns do this, what their outcomes are? How does what happened in Georgetown relate to what this can be effective with? Do we have that information?
There are a lot of towns that don't have their own police department.
Right.
We can certainly, we're planning on having 2 more presentations, I believe. One that is gonna be answering any questions that you give us this meeting, which that can be one of them. And another one where we're gonna be putting together a final report.
Right.
So the next meeting, if you'd like to know how communities that have decided to not have a police department or a specific patrol contract with the sheriff's department, how they're faring, we can certainly present on that data.
I think that would be important to know and understand, certainly for me, because I've never heard of this. Not that obviously it exists, but I don't know anything about it, so I'd love to know more about how it works.
Well, in our community, Silver Plume has this model,
Okay,
except that I don't know that they have specific funding for public safety alternative investment. If that makes sense.
right, there are 300 people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so I mean, it's very tiny. I can see it working in a very tiny community. Also, if they do have issues, they can call the county. But for us, if we're looking at, okay, Georgetown's gonna go with the county, or do we, reconstruct our police department? I'd like to understand, like, what happens in Georgetown? What kind of things do the police respond to here that this might really either be great for or maybe not so good for, depending on, I don't know what our activities are actually, what our spread of activities are in terms of what are the calls.
I think what you're looking at is that right now.
Mm-hmm,
I think you're kind of working under the minimal policing
right,
right now with about 18 hours worth of patrolling. And the other thing I'd like to add is there's no such thing as a hybrid possible in Georgetown.
okay,
The sheriff said, I'm not doing that.
oh, all right then,
So
very good,
if we were going to hire a police chief, hypothetically,
yeah,
say the police chief's working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then the rest of the time, we're gonna pay the sheriff to do it. He said, no, I'm not doing that, because
okay,
first off, he's not gonna have 2 chiefs running
No.
law enforcement in Georgetown. And then he's not gonna take on the liability of picking up the slack when the police chief here is say, I'm not gonna go on that call.
mm-hmm,
Which I think he tried to say in a very diplomatic way, that that's the way it used to be here.
oh, okay,
And when he was saying that your highest call volumes were on the weekends and then your officers weren't even responding or on shift here. I think he was very nice in saying that was how we got into some of these messes
mm-hmm,
previously. So it would be very easy, as Kasia was alluding to, it'd be very easy for us to say, the cost to do a hybrid would be this. Then translating that into a real agreement with Sheriff Harris would be extremely difficult.
Well, especially if you said no.
Yeah,
However, Empire has a police department and a chief, and they have several hours that are covered by the county. And I don't know what their IGA looks like. That's certainly something that I think we need to investigate.
we can get a copy of that for you. And we can actually circle back with Chief Harris and say, hey, is this even possible? Because we heard something different from you during your presentation, but we want to confirm, could we do the Empire model?
It may not be a desirable model for the sheriff or for us, but
You know,
again, they are required to provide some basic services when we don't have services.
absolutely.
We can't be ignored, and I'm not trying to cut corners in that. What happens in Flint, Michigan is great for Flint, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to have a lot of application here. And as far as painting buildings, it makes sense as far as graffiti and some upkeep, but again, that really isn't the Georgetown model, so, some of these programs the county already has in place. And we benefit from them just because we are in the county, but I don't want us to rely totally on mental health opportunities that the county provides through chat is going to eliminate our need for law enforcement, and typically chat gets called out when law enforcement is responding to make sure to secure the safety of the chat members until they can provide services. So it's a web that is that's overlapped.
It's definitely,
So-
yeah.
But I do definitely want more information, and I can start to compile a list, and I'm sure everyone else has questions as to
We're gonna ask you about that in the next thing
Okay.
on the agenda. The reason I think that Tanisha's focused on this, we've talked about this, and in our conversations with other citizens, how is the task force doing and how it comes up. I probably, every fifth person, by the way, if we do nothing, the sheriff still has to do their work here in Georgetown. So we wanted to bring that up and answer the question. It's true, that is accurate. However, is that the level of service you want here in Georgetown? So we brought it forward today.
Right,
We also don't want to lose sight of whatever the dollar amount is for this service. It has to be balanced against all the other stuff that the town has to provide. And Kasia is only touching on the tip of the iceberg of those things that has to be paid for. Roads, bridges, planning, development, staffing, all that stuff still has to be paid for in the same breath as $750,000 worth of law enforcement or $630,000 in an IGA with the sheriff's department. So I think that all has to be taken into account all in the same discussion. So we just wanted to bring that forward because we've been hearing it from the people that are in this town that if we do nothing, it's still the county's responsibility.
but would the county actually step up if we did nothing? Cause I thought Sheriff Harris was pretty clear too. We're not gonna be as available to Georgetown if we don't have an IGA with them. Did I hear that correctly?
And that's why Kasia just laid out for you, their legal responsibility is right out here, copied and pasted in this
Right.
the presentation.
we're gonna be in a queue, just like anyone else
Exactly.
calling for police services that the county needs to respond to, and they're going to respond to that with the amount of staffing, just as if we had our own department and 10 calls come in, they can only handle it, in a certain way,
Sequentially,
so.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
The stats as far as the crime stats in the town. We get about 20% of the calls for the county. And I tried to figure out how we compare like the rest of the country, but because we're not at 100,000 for population, all the stats get pretty skewed there, so I didn't think they were worth including.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that too. Okay, so anybody online, Peter or Amanda, do you guys have questions?
I do not. Thank you so much.
I think I've read a lot and been part of some restorative justice type things, and I think that works better, domestic violence, stuff like that. The crime that I'm always most worried about is the stuff that just drifts off the highway. Those people would never be candidates for restorative justice. And then the other thing, when we need enforcement, like this weekend with the insane traffic and everything, a non-certified code enforcement, if that's the only thing we have, is not going to be helpful. They were running 3 rescues up St. Mary's, 1 on Grays and Torreys, not an officer or anybody available. That would be where we'd like to have, our own police force. I know it was just a weekend, but that seems to be all of our weekends now. But so I think it's really interesting, and a part, I think it helps control, like the painting of the buildings and things to do, helps cut down on juvenile crime and everything. So there's definitely a role for that. But I think a pure non-police force model, I don't think would work here, but parts of it I think are really a good idea.
Just to clarify, is a minimal policing, not a no policing.
Right.
Like, we wouldn't have our own department in this situation or a specific contract with the county, but I think I made it really clear what we do have to have police.
Right,
do.
it would be by law, whatever happens, yeah.
I don't think this is available in Colorado, definitely the Denver area, but in some of the Midwest major cities, there are, is that dead or what?
It's the Gone Show.
There are some major departments that are contracting with private security quasi enforcement to come in and patrol and just be those extra set of eyes to then make the call for a real police officer to respond, a 911 call, if, they see activity going on. And other departments are doing this, financial and staffing reasons. Now, I personally would wonder what the caliber of those people are that are in that gray area of security are, so.
No, you know.
I'm being polite here, but that is also a trend that's happening, not, and I don't see that here, you even had mentioned, in the past, part-time law enforcement officers, and I don't think in this whole general area, we have, even outside of the county, that isn't an opportunity, it's not available, so all of these, it's like the fire department, we used to have a great volunteer fire department, and it's just not an opportunity anymore.
Yeah.
So, those are all the what ifs that don't pan out, that aren't available, so.
I've had conversations with no less than 5 part-time officers that work for another couple agencies
Up there,
up there, asking if we were looking for a chief.
yeah,
So that tells you that while they're working part-time, they're constantly looking for other jobs, and that will not work for us. Otherwise, we're just a patrol officer now, right? We're trying to.
you don't even, yeah,
They would have to be ready to be our full-time chief and not be,
And stay.
be here and not on the other. Because I've also read articles about communities of smaller size that hire part of their force are actually retired officers who say retired at 60, 65, but still wanted to work some. They worked on a part-time, but they were hired as an officer, but they didn't do as many shifts maybe as everybody else did. But some towns smaller towns have done this type of thing to get officers.
I'm so sorry. I do have one more comment. Oh, I'm sorry. I hate when I'm on Zoom and I can't see. No matter what model we go with, I do think code enforcement is a really imperative thing. One of the things that we did here at our Ward 1 constituent meeting last week was that there is some frustration about code enforcement within the community. And so I don't know if we need to take that approach separately and look at that as a completely separate entity from law enforcement so that we're able to get a decent result. But I just realized I wanted to throw that out there, that we have to figure that out in whatever model we go with.
And the
Yeah,
county did indicate that if we were to enlist with them, that their code enforcement would be
Included.
available. That was one of the
Yeah.
all-inclusive conditions.
Sign up now.
Well, I was gonna say that I think that a code enforcement officer would possibly maybe reduce our overall cost if we had a total of 4 officers, but 3 post-certified and 1 just a code enforcement officer. Maybe that could make us actually fiscally responsible with that, but that still doesn't fit the bill, because with 3 post-certified officers, they would still, to manage coverage, they would still have to work around the clock, and they would get no days off. So that's still not gonna,
Right.
but my concern is, as we're all talking, you know, how can we be fiscally responsible? Because I know what the sheriff said, you gotta go all in or not in.
Mhm.
I understand that, but that's way over our budget too. So maybe we should take the budget and do some reverse engineering. To see what we can afford,
Oh,
Mhm.
you know, just reverse engineer it. So see what we can afford within the budget. And then maybe adjust from there. Cause we're gonna have to find out exactly if we have $650,000 for round numbers here. If we only have $650,000 and we figure 4 officers are gonna cost with a salary, with equipment and vehicles and insurance and you name it, is gonna cost us it's gonna cost us $750,000. Well, we're $100,000 in the red. So that's why I think we ought to reverse engineer it and see what we can do within our budget. Because right now, all we're speaking in is hypotheticals.
Mhm. Right, so that we've kind of talked about that too. Right now, we're looking at sort of best cases. And we can certainly look at fewer officers to fit into a budget. That could totally be something.
Yeah, but again, that's gonna be. How do you do that? Do you adjust their
Right.
hours in service? Are they gonna work 12-hour shifts? You know,
Yeah,
that's
but
2 officers per day with 1 being off. Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe 10s, as the sheriff, as you guys have all iterated, sheriff won't pick up any slack for us.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know how Randy and John ever got a day off, and I've talked with John numerous times down by the lake. And he'd tell me, I said, John, when was the last day you had off? Because I can't remember. And we're never gonna get any longevity out of, it doesn't matter, police officer, just an employee. If they don't have time off, we won't get any longevity out of it.
And that's true. Mhm. Mhm. Any other comments or questions? Anybody else online? No, we're good. Keisha, thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, yes, you may.
Only if you identify yourself for the
Yeah.
record, sir.
Yes.
I'm Tom Elliott. Has there been any thought or discussion about a combined police force with other county municipalities? And the ones that come to mind obviously are Empire and Silver Blue.
Oh, with other municipalities. Dennis, have you guys looked at that at all? I know it's come up in conversation, but I really don't know how far that's gone. Mhm.
Because hypothetically, if Silver Plume and Empire contributed to the budget that we have, then we might be looking at a 5-officer police force.
That could be something similar to what Keystone, and I think, Peter, did you bring this up the last time at our last meeting? that Keystone recently
Maybe not. Maybe.
started when they
Yeah.
combined with Dillon.
That's correct. Yeah, Keystone, when they recently incorporated, was contracting all services through the county, and then they saw that some things weren't working, so they now have a combined Dillon and Keystone Police Department, just within the last month or so.
Tom, how many officers are at this time in Empire?
I believe three.
And the chief and two?
The chief and I believe it's the chief and two. And they have a full-time code enforcement officer.
In addition to the two other officers?
Well, it might just be the chief and one plus.
That's what I think, but
That's what I
couldn't-
think.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
So there's
I
three
can
points.
only, I can only picture the three.
There's 3 staff members. We believe that we know there's a chief, there's another officer, and probably the third is code enforcement.
I believe that's
I
correct.
think that's right,
So
so
there's
that
only
thing.
2 sworn officers. You think,
I believe so.
and then Silver Plume,
Nothing.
Well,
Well,
County,
some-
they have county.
But they have money. I mean, they might have part of a budget.
But they are incorporated, they're an
we can
incorporated.
Yeah.
look at that. I've had experience doing this, and usually the town that has 0 doesn't wanna pay for anything more, they're happy with 0. So that's one of those things, you gotta find a partner that's willing to pay extra. It usually happens when there's a crisis where they're forced into doing it. So Silver Plume's had a crisis recently where they are now forced by their citizenry to invest more, they come to the table. Empire, if they have 2 and they're happy with 2, they're not willing to give anybody up. And this would be one of those things where you're putting 2 and 2 together to get rid of 1 on each side and get 2 to share between 2 communities. So it's certainly something we can look at, and it would be a long haul solution. So maybe what we might be looking at is entering into an IGA with the county with the idea of a long-term solution of a tri-city metro police department, but it would be a long-term thing. And I do know, and I've only been here 2 months, but I do know from all the stories I've heard that there are a lot of combined efforts between municipalities around here, but they've been like 10 years in the making. Is that about right?
Keep in mind though, with Silver Plume, they, within the last year and a half,
Year and a half.
have also stepped up and committed some tax dollars, general fund, whatever, to supporting the fire authority over and above what they were required to do. And that was a decision made by, the community there. So they are, at first glance, it looks as if they are positive towards emergency response and providing those services to their community. So it's, I wouldn't say that they have to have a disaster on their hand to be weighing that. And I mean, they also know their limitations because they are so small, and that's a big bite to take off for a community of that size. But if the approach was, hey, we're closer to them than we are the Springs, and the same with Empire.
And remember, Sheriff Harris did say that, the way of doing business with the county is gonna change.
Right. He was.
Because there's a new sheriff in town.
I thought that was pretty might be an opportunity too.
Oh.
Nate's got a good operation over there, so maybe if he's willing to cooperate,
I just mentioned the 2 closest ones.
yeah.
They're pretty far though, I think Idaho Springs is a great opportunity and they have definitely, their department is,
I know one problem that's
But
more
there's some
more
far-
increasing in Silver Plume is traffic.
yeah,
They've had quite a few congested traffic
Well,
issues
In Silver Plume?
in Silver Plume.
Okay.
Because of the mere people getting off the highway and heading through town.
they've had almost like a 300% increase in their commercial district over the last year or two also, so.
You can tell me your
They're budding economic.
your address.
Physical address?
Yeah.
717 Third Street.
It's yellow.
Cause he doesn't want Harry to dig him on the next minute.
Save me some work, thanks.
So maybe like not a hybrid, but a combination of the municipalities is still on the discussion list. Yeah, okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, well, very good. Thank you, Kasia. That was very informative and something I had never heard of. So that's always good to have a whole new thing to think about. Okay, next steps. You were indicating that
Next
there's
steps.
things with next steps.
Yes, we've been, a couple of things, but the first and most important is we've talked about an open house.
Yes.
And my recommendation is for this group to host an open house. I know I go back and forth on this, but I would like to present a fully cooked package for the board of selectmen to consider, and this is an important element considering there's been such chatter on Facebook. So my recommendation would be for this group to host an open house the third week of July after the holidays been quieted down. And the rules would be such that it's not an opportunity for it to turn into a shouting match or a town hall, but for the group to go through the information it has collected to this point. And staff is going to condense this information into a presentation similar to what you had at the parks open house that was done a few weeks ago down at Cabin Creek. We are going to create a FAQ sheet that compares the different proposals. We might even be able to condense it into a chart that looks kind of like if you ever are shopping for a product online and you have a spec chart that shows one proposal and certain important categories like patrol hours and how they compare across the grid.
I think that's perfect.
We're gonna give it a shot. I mentioned this to Kasia, she looked at me funny, but we're gonna try it.
At the community center?
We haven't picked a place yet, we haven't picked a date, but I'm throwing this out at you, and if I get all heads nodding, then we're gonna get to work on it. But also part of this is going to be, I'm asking you all to send me your questions, or if there was something you heard over the last 3 meetings that just wasn't fully fleshed out, please send me, I want some more information about this topic, or this question I heard, the answer that was given wasn't everything I needed. So please send that to me, hopefully like within the next week or so. And then we will put it together and we will give you full-blown answers in writing a paragraph for those, okay? And if we are stymied by that, we'll reach out to you again and we'll try to ask more questions and get more from you. So, am I getting a consensus from everybody, including the 2 online today, that an open house is something you desire for us to organize?
I think an open
Yes,
house is.
yes.
Is a good idea, however, I wonder if it should be addressed to this group or to the Board of Selectmen, because we're making a recommendation based on information. I could almost maybe see 2, or could it be a combined opportunity for the community to address this group with the board present to hear it before this group makes the final pitch, and I still think we're gonna have to, especially because it's summer, but we may need to have more than one,
I
so that
agree.
people can, have the opportunity, whether they come or not, that's on them, but
I'm seeing that you've been asking for email comments. I'm seeing that you're having this open house comment solicitation before you do your final recommendation. And then I'm seeing the board of selectmen having another open house opportunity once they receive your input. So we're having 3 very public opportunities for public input. If you think there should be more, I'm all ears.
Well, we can call it at that point, but if we received any emails too, I think at this time, I would like to be able to see that, get that information. It's one thing for someone to ask me something, but if they've asked you something or asked you, we need to combine that information so that whether we felt we answered them correctly or not, it's still coming back to the group. And we know this community is great for a conversation and not necessarily an email, but we also know this is a hot and emotional topic.
Yes.
And so as we move forward, I would like that information to be shared with us so that we can take that into consideration as we're going through, and it may trigger some more questions that we have that we want, that, you know, need staff response back from, or staff research.
Definitely,
Back on, our next meeting for this group is the 11th.
right.
So, and then we have another one on the 18th after that, so are you,
Yes, that was my next,
So-
I wanted to talk to you about the rest of the schedule. So if we're targeting the third week of July for this public input open house. Then I would then recommend that the last week of July. Be the next meeting of this group to convene, and that would be collecting the input from the open house. Having all of the information that would be responding to your questions and requests for additional information, the email comments. And then any other information that we collect from the open house, I said that already. And then in that meeting, by the end of that meeting, I would like this group to zero in on your top two choices. So that we can have one last meeting where this group says our recommendation will be this, and this is how we're going to formalize our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So that would be the first week of August, and then this group is done.
So on July 11th, we're scheduled to meet to discuss and deliberate.
Yeah, we won't do that. We're gonna have our third week of July open house. Then the last week of July, we'll schedule a meeting to collect all the information and actually discuss what we want to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. And then that last meeting will be formalizing the actual recommendation of how we're gonna present it.
So I'm sorry, hang on a second. So when we send our questions and comments to you now,
Yes,
like we go
next
home,
week or
we
so.
type up, we send it to you.
Yes,
I'm thinking meeting on the 11th might be helpful just to go through those questions, what emails have come in. Wouldn't that make sense before we go?
we will not have any answers to any of your questions or that information by the 11th.
well, then what about the 18th?
Yeah,
Because
what
I
about
would
if we
certainly
would-
want that information to
Right.
come to us before we go forward with the public.
Which is what we're
Okay.
wanting to do, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so then let's swap those two ideas.
So we're
we'll
gonna
have the
take out
next meeting the third week of July, the 18th,
the 18th, okay.
and then we'll target the last week of July for the open house.
and what day are we talking about for that?
I don't have my calendar in front of me, but somebody else,
The 24th is a Thursday.
I could do that Thursday, or the last week starts with the 28th. So on the 18th, we're gonna have a meeting where we discuss all of these questions and go through all of that. Is that what we're
the
saying?
18th.
Okay, on the 18th.
1,500, we're talking 1,500, what time?
We haven't even talked about a date yet, hold on.
You mean on the 18th?
Yeah, on the 18th.
That's 15.
Yeah,
we
that's
can do
3
3
o'clock.
Okay, see, I'm getting better. So the 18th at 3 o'clock, and then the next one could be
You said
Thursday,
the 24th?
24th is a Thursday, or we've got
Monday, the 28th.
the 28th, if we wanted a open house with the public,
It's up to you.
or even Tuesday, the 29th is not a board day.
Let's do that. Let's do the 29th.
Yeah.
How's that, Mac? What's that for your schedule?
Well, Fridays are tough for me to meet.
The 29th, the
Is it Tuesday?
It's
Tuesday?
a Tuesday works for me.
And
The 18th here, may not.
Okay,
Okay.
I may not be able to make that, but the 22nd, I should be able to meet.
29th.
29th.
29th, okay, all right.
29 though, if we have
Maybe it's a
that,
Tuesday.
if we have that with the community, we need to have that at a later time.
yeah, like 6 o'clock.
Figure out.
No, I can't do that at 3.
Okay, and we'll target the community center as the venue?
This is the 29th
Yes,
at 1800.
yes. And then the. Everybody, there we go, August. 7th, yeah,
August 7th is a Thursday.
how about August 7th for your final meeting to craft your final recommendation to the board?
But that only gives
That gives almost 2 weeks.
Well, the next board meeting is the 12th, so what, if we're crafting that, is that being presented to the board
Oh, that's true.
on the
How about
12th?
Fifth, how about the fifth?
Tuesday the 5th.
1,500.
Yes. They were only off of our original schedule by a week.
Now, is this a thing where we can post all of these meetings? Now we're not too far in advance, we're kind of in that special window.
Yes, Mary.
That looked like a Rob Connell thing. Okay, so we can do that, and then, so on the 5th, Tuesday, we come up with our final recommendation, that gets us on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen for the 12th, and then after that, there might be another open house opportunity or comment
Then
opportunity.
it's out of the task force hands and it's all under the board's.
Okay, and we wanna come up with two recommends.
I would like you to, on the
For 5th,
18th. To narrow it down to 2.
on the 18th.
Before the first.
So I would like you to, by the end of the 18th, after you've gone through all the answers to your questions and additional information requests and the comments that you've gotten from the email, to say, okay, we want to do the minimal policing and the minimal policing,
Okay,
or something like that.
yeah, right. And then on the 29th is our open house, we go over everything.
Yes,
Then on the 4th, we go down to 1, we narrow it from there to
and
1.
that works very well, because then when you're talking to the citizens, you can actually show them, here's what what we're thinking about, this or that,
Mhm,
not the pie in the sky, everything out there is still on the table,
mhm,
yeah?
mhm.
So on the 29th, are we going to invite the Board of Selectmen to also to be
Yes.
present
Yeah.
for the community meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, do you want me to invite Sheriff Harris to be there too? And actually give him a few minutes to talk about what he wants to do?
I would say yes.
But then that means you need to be prepared to
Talk about
hit any highlights from what you presented to us, and Keisha, you need to be prepared to hit any highlights that the community may have on today's
That's- yeah, that's no
presentation,
problem.
so that it's, yeah, so it's all, they can get an overview of it.
Sure.
Okay,
Everybody gets 4 minutes.
yeah,
Do you wanna do it in that format, or did you like the format that we followed at the park thing, where we set up different stations and people wanna hear about a certain area?
we missed too much with that. If you're over here and you don't hear that conversation, if this task force and the Board of Selectmen need to hear all the public comments,
Okay,
I'd rather have it a little bit more
Okay.
formal,
Formal.
go through
Agreed.
the motions, yeah.
now, Georgia, since you're the chair of this group, I think we should appropriately lean on you to be the MC of the program, so.
Sure,
Drop the mic.
Yeah. And you may disagree with me, but I think it's very important for decorum that it's not
right, casual, it's fairly formal, but not rigid.
Yes, but also it's not just an open house to just start shouting out.
Correct.
And we can indicate, you know, the timing
Absolutely.
of the comments, and I think
Absolutely.
similar to, you know, in the past, if the comment or whatever has already been made, you know, we don't need to hear the same thing 10 times.
That's
You know, you could say, I agree with so-and-so.
And the comments aren't open for discussion. They're comments to be made, correct? So this group or whatever group would not be responding to the comments as.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
taking notes so that we know.
Exactly, so we know what everybody said.
And we could actually, if necessary.
Well, don't ask me to be the stenographer because that won't work.
All right, we're not asking,
We could
that
get-
duly noted there.
Get some mics
Yes,
in case there are people in the audience who aren't loud.
right, and that would be at the community center.
We could set up a podium though, and they
Yeah,
can
they
come
could
up
walk
to the podium, you know, just as if they were to sign in here for a board meeting and there was 20 comments or 20 people that wanted to speak,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah, that can be well
We can
organized.
figure that out.
The logistics of that can be.
Also, for the 18th, will we have an opportunity to look at the various emails if any has come in? Like, I know I got
Yes.
that one.
Yes.
So you'll send those out to everybody, so we can read those at a time. Perfect. That's awesome.
So we're canceling the 11th,
Yes,
Yes.
off the books.
and since we didn't post it yet, we don't have to do any extra work.
Wow.
Oh, very clever. Very clever. Oh, drop the pen. Okay, so July 18th, we're meeting at 3 p.m. That's gonna be a discussion. We're gonna be here. We're gonna narrow our recommends to 2 if possible. We're gonna be reviewing all comments and opportunities that we have. Then we're gonna meet on the 29th. That's gonna be an open house at 6 p.m. at the community center for comments from our community. And then we are going to meet on August 5th, Tuesday at 3 p.m. to craft a final recommend to the Board of Selectmen for that next following meeting.
Correct,
So that's what this group is tasked with.
yes.
Okay, and then any comments should still be made to town clerk at townofgeorgetown.us. If anybody has any comments, and those will be distributed to us.
And the action on August 5th for the board will only be to accept recommendation, not to act upon it. They will just accept and then make a plan for.
Public
some other-
discussion or review
Yes,
or
yes.
whatever. Okay,
So ideally, when would staff like our questions so that you have time to
right.
do your research?
What's the date of the week from today? It's
The 7th?
the 7th.
Yes,
What's that Friday?
the 11th.
Let's say the 11th.
Okay,
That would give you a
We
week.
just scratched it.
Yes,
Okay,
for KJ to do her work.
so just questions to staff by the
I
11th.
won't be here the 18th, so.
Okay. I saw that the conference.
Yeah.
I wanna publicly thank Keisha, because she reminded me, she texted me today, otherwise I'd still be underneath my truck.
Under the truck.
yay. Well, also thank you for your presentation today. It was well done. Whole new thing to think about. So thank you. Any other comments or questions or
Move to adjourn.
responses? So it is 4 o'clock. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody online.
Beauty must. Thank you, Dennis and Keisha.
Thank you.
So, Trish, you have